Page 45, exercises 3 and 4.
Actually, I think life with brothers and sisters is completely different from being an only child. In my opinion, having even one sibling makes you a much more sociable person and easier to get on with. What's more, you get used to being teased. You're not so sensitive. As a result, you integrate better when you go to school and at work too, I think.
Well, I have 2 brothers and it's great having someone to do things with. Incidentally, we've always been close and we get on very well. And we have similar interests and hobbies.
So, as far as having siblings concerned, would you have liked to be an only child?
I think my life would have been much less interesting without them. So, yes, I was happy to have 2 brothers.
And as regards to your character, do you think it had an influence?
Yes. Mind you, we used to have a lot of fights as well.
Page 51, exercise 3.
We all carry round baggage, attitudes and beliefs that colour our response to new situations. If you're lucky, these will be can-do messages, but many of us are programmed for failure. Perhaps every time you stepped out of the door when you were little, your parents cried, "Oh, be careful!" as if doom and disaster lurked at every turn, or friends say, "Ooh, I wouldn't attempt that if I were you." These negative statements can do more harm than good. If you hear them often enough, you learn to expect the worst. And this can often lead to people developing irrational phobias. So often the immediate reaction to a new or daunting situation is, I can't handle it. Most people's confidence is a level or 2 below their competency, but no, you really are better than you believe. Everybody feels fearful in unfamiliar situations, but that doesn't mean we should avoid them. Now, taking risks, even tiny ones like picking up a telephone to make a complaint, is a necessary part of accepting adult responsibility. The best strategy you can adopt is to understand why you feel so fearful and learn how to deal with it. Then, when you succeed in a difficult situation, you'll feel more confident about approaching it next time around. The people you admire for their apparent confidence and ability to cope with any situation are probably feeling just as daunted as you would be, but they don't let it stand in their way.
Page 55, exercise 2.
You will hear an interview with Cindy Talbot on the radio programme Young Hero or Heroine of the Week. For questions 1 to 5, choose the answer A, B, C or D, which fits best according to what you hear.
Hello and welcome to our program Young Hero or Heroine of the Week. The subject this week is Cindy Talbot, a final-year college student who was on the 3rd day of her 5-day solo hiking trip through Colorado's National Forest when something really extraordinary happened to her. She was struck by lightning. Apparently, lightning kills nearly 100 Americans each year, more than hurricanes or tornadoes, and to survive a direct hit is almost a miracle. Luckily, Cindy was rescued, and we are fortunate to have her with us in the studio today.
Hi.
Tell me, Cindy, what were you actually doing when the lightning struck?
Well, I'd noticed the thunderclouds gathering, and I was resting on a rocky peak people call Eagle Peak, when I heard the thunder rumbling in the distance, and I was sort of unnerved. I gotta say, I thought the thunder sounded kind of ominous. So I said to myself, Cindy, you'd better get moving. You see, I didn't want to get caught in a storm like that, but I was too late, I guess. I remember when the downpour started, and it must have lasted for about an hour, at least an hour. I knew it wasn't going to stop just like that, so I found shelter under some trees.
I suppose that seemed the best thing to do at the time.
To tell the truth, it's not a very wise thing to do, considering it was an electric storm, or so I'm told. But I didn't have much option. Everything happened so quickly, and there didn't seem to be anywhere else nearby where I might find shelter. But eventually, the sun came out, and the rain started to move away. So I came out from under the trees to dry off a little bit. And then I just put my backpack on. It has a metal frame, by the way, when the whole world exploded. And I felt an electrical charge surging through my body. It was literally a bolt out of the blue. I realized that by some miracle I was still alive and had to get help. But I couldn't move my legs, so I had to crawl. It sure was heavy going, but after about an hour, I reached a wet, muddy kind of track in a clearing in the forest. Fortunately for me, Rod and Mark, the two guys who came to my rescue, had just happened to be on their way back home in their pickup. They run a trapping company, and they'd been driving around in the forest checking their traps, I think. If they hadn't come along at that moment, I'm not sure I would have survived the ordeal. When they saw me and heard my story, I don't think they thought there was a grain of truth in what I was saying at first. Rod told me later that he thought what I told him was a bit far-fetched, to say the least. They said they'd seen this weird-looking object seem to be kind of sprawling across the road. Not moving, but it wasn't a fallen tree. It looked human. I thought, gee, thanks. Anyway, they jumped out of the truck to get a closer look, and they found me. They managed to get me to the nearest hospital in record time, and, well, in a few days, I was on my feet again. Thanks to the guys. But I've still got the scars on my back, on my hips, and foot, too. And I'm scared to death of lightning now.
I suppose lightning's not normally something to be terrified about, but you've just got to know what you're doing, haven't you? So, do you feel the experience has had any long-term effect on you?
I think it's made me realize that I'm a lot more resilient than I thought. I'm not really a quitter, and I'm determined, really determined to go on hiking.
But perhaps not in electric storms.
I can't promise that, I'm afraid.
Cindy, thanks for talking to us today.
Page 58, Exercise 2.
Speaker 1.
It must have been about 2 in the morning when the alarm went off. There was a mad scramble as we realised that it wasn't just a routine test. We grabbed what we could and made our way to the emergency stairs. It was then that I realised I'd left my passport and all my money in the room. I was just about to dash back and get them when I thought, what am I doing? I'd have been really stupid to put myself at risk for the sake of a few replaceable possessions.
Speaker 2.
We were travelling around the Mediterranean at the time. We'd been out for a meal, and when we got back to our hotel, we noticed that the safe was open. We'd been told to use it for our passports and valuables and money and travellers' checks. Well, of course, they'd all gone. Not a trace of them anywhere. It was all a bit of a disaster. We spent ages at the police station the next morning, and even longer trying to cancel credit cards and sort everything out. In the end, we decided the only thing to do was go to the embassy and see what they could do to help us.
Speaker 3.
It couldn't have been worse. I only had a few more miles to go when it happened, and It was almost midnight. Anyway, there was nothing else for it. I had two choices, either to spend the night in the car or abandon it and walk the rest of the way. I chose the latter, although on reflection it might have been wiser to stay where I was.
Speaker 4.
It was all very embarrassing. Every time I went through the scanner, there was this horrible bleep, and they kept sending me back. The people in the queue behind me weren't best pleased either, as we'd been in the queue for ages. I was beginning to feel that I'd never get on the flight, but I thought that if I lost my cool, it might make me look even more suspicious. I decided not to panic. Suddenly, the man operating the machine noticed that I was wearing a silver bracelet. He asked me to take it off, and guess what? I sailed straight through. So much for modern technology.
Speaker 5.
As soon as we entered the building, it was obvious that something was wrong. It was chaotic. There were people everywhere. All outgoing and incoming flights seemed to have been cancelled. We couldn't understand why at first, but we soon found out that it had something to do with an ash cloud from a volcano in the north, making flying dangerous. Nobody had any idea how long we might have to spend there, and the prospect of sleeping on the terminal floor for the night didn't inspire me in the least. We decided to go back home and wait to see what happened the next day.
Page 61, exercises 2 and 3.
If you ask me, people who take exercise are full of their own self-importance. They take it all so seriously. It's a kind of religion. And it's so difficult to talk to sporty people. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but they get that far-off look in their eyes and their feet keep moving on the spot. But what worries me more than anything else is the fact that exercising makes people think that they can live forever. For them, it seems to put off the awful moment when they realise that they're mere mortals. My take on it is completely different. In my opinion, coming to terms with yourself and finding out who you really are, well, all that comes from inside you, not from running round a park with 2,000 other people. Added to which, exercise is downright repetitive and unending. The minute you stop, the flab returns and the pulse slows down again. And another thing, which a lot of people don't realise, is that it's unbelievably expensive. Just take, for example, things like club fees, equipment, and all sorts of fancy outfits. No, for me, the best club to join is free. It doesn't have an age limit, it requires no previous experience or special outfits, and it's right there in your front room. All you need to do is join the Couch Potato League and head off to your rightful place beside the fireplace.
Page 67, exercise 2.
You will hear 3 different extracts. For questions 1 to 6, choose the answer A, B or C which fits best according to what you hear. There are 2 questions for each extract. Extract 1.
So how did you get into hypnotherapy in the first place?
I was having trouble sleeping, you see. It had gone on for so long. I'd actually started doing a bit of research into hypnosis and, well, although there seems to be no doubt that it can be incredibly effective. Mind you, I was very apprehensive about going down the same route myself, I can tell you. But I'd been prescribed some mild sleeping pills and... Anyway, I decided to go and see a hypnotherapist because I honestly felt that I was on the verge of becoming addicted to them.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And although I never felt that I really went under, as it were, afterwards I had the best night's sleep I'd had in years.
Oh, well, that just goes to show.
And after the session, the insomnia sort of cleared up. I learned something subconsciously. but I'm still a bit sceptical.
Funnily enough, I actually had hypnosis for about 2 years.
Oh.
And after the first session, my mind seemed razor sharp, and I had this feeling of great power. It only took a minute or so to put me to sleep.
Ooh, very different from my experience then.
Well, yes, very. In fact, when I woke up, I felt I could fight King Kong. But it also helped me to concentrate on my game and block out the crowd.
Oh, right.
I must admit, I've always had a kind of fascination with the creative possibilities of our subconscious.
Yeah, me too. Apparently, we only use 10% of our brain, so it's not surprising that it's capable of things we haven't even got a clue about.
Extract 2.
In many countries, smoking's now very much frowned upon. Smokers are treated like social outcasts and have to retreat outside public places if they want to indulge their habit. But giving it up isn't that easy. Most of us know someone who's tried to give it up at some point or another. Maybe you've even tried yourself, or been egged on by friends and family to do it. The first time, yes, it does seem to work, up until lunchtime anyway. The second time, well, you don't feel like having a cigarette for 24 hours, but the urge slowly comes back. And you just know you are going to fail. You feel cynical about it. You might tell your friends the timing just wasn't right. The excuses are endless. But there's something completely different that those desperate to kick the habit could try, which might just work. And that is hypnosis treatment. While you're under, they repeat a word, freedom, to you. And when you come round, you think of it every time you have a craving. But by the time you think of the word, you have no desire to light up another cigarette. All you have to do is be absolutely determined that you want to give up. And it's not only smoking that it works for. Do you ever suffer from stage fright, for example? With the help of hypnosis, you'll find that all your first night fears are dissolved. All you then need to do is look forward to playing the character, and while on stage, you should simply become that character. Try a session under hypnosis and see. You'll be able to talk yourself into a semi-hypnotic state any time you're under stress, for instance, when you're flying. You won't be scared anymore. It'll just help you to relax.
Extract 3.
Medical emergencies are everyone's biggest nightmare, aren't they? The idea of suddenly falling ill on a long journey, particularly if you happen to find yourself in a critical situation on a plane, can put you off the idea of travelling further afield altogether. If you're lucky, there might be a doctor on board the plane, but if you're unlucky, a first aid kit may not be enough to deal with your complaint, and even if the plane was able to make an emergency landing, it may be a very long way to the nearest hospital. One major airline now boasts a next-generation improvement on this situation. A doctor who can monitor a patient's condition from the ground via satellite transmission. The telemedicine link shows vital signs such as blood pressure, temperature and oxygen in the blood. To check on a passenger, flight attendants who've undergone basic medical training first attach sensors to the patient. A monitoring unit then plugs into the plane's satellite communication system, and this allows continuous two-way communication between the plane and the airport. The doctor on the ground receives the signals through a computer and then decides whether the patient could safely be treated by the crew or whether an emergency landing is necessary. A comforting thought, isn't it?